Karen MOM stole my baby, I knocked her out and the cops handcuffed her fast. The scream tore out of me the second I saw the empty crib, blankets still warm, my son gone without a trace. 2 officers stood in my living room and one of them, chewing gum like this was routine, said, "Ma'am, the HOA president filed the report." My name is Maya Coleman and 40 minutes earlier my biggest problem had been unpaid parking tickets, not losing my baby. Now I was staring at a folder full of lies with Karen Whitfield's signature stamped across every single page. I want to tell you exactly how a woman who complains about mailbox colors ended up holding my son hostage. 3 months earlier, I moved into Willow Creek Estates with my 6-month OLD, Dalton, chasing a fresh start after my divorce. The lawns were manicured, the fences painted regulation beige and every resident smiled like they were auditioning for a brochure. Karen Whitfield ran the HOA board like a small dictatorship, clipboard in hand, ruler of every blade of grass. She welcomed me with a fruit basket and a 17-page rulebook, smiling the whole time like both were gifts. "We just like things a certain way here," she said, eyes lingering too long on my second-hand minivan parked outside. I laughed it off then, thinking she was just another overzealous neighbor, not a woman keeping detailed files on everyone. Little did I know Karen had already opened a manila folder with my name typed neatly across the tab. My crime, apparently, was leaving a stroller on my own porch for 6 extra minutes past the clutter curfew. The first notice came taped to my door, bright pink, citing HOA Bylaw 4.2, Section C, Subsection 2. I read it twice, confused, then shrugged and moved the stroller, assuming that would be the end of it. It wasn't the end. It was the opening move in a game I didn't know I'd already agreed to play. Within a week, 3 more notices appeared: wrong trash bin color, grass a 1/4 inch too tall, wind chimes too loud. Each violation carried a fine, each fine carried a deadline and each deadline felt designed for me to miss. I noticed Karen's car slow rolling past my house at odd hours, phone raised, camera clicking through the windshield. "She's building a case," warned my neighbor Priya, who'd survived 2 HOA board terms and Karen's wrath firsthand. I brushed off Priya's warning, certain a reasonable adult couldn't weaponize a homeowners association against a single mother. Then Karen cornered me at the mailbox, complimenting Dalton's onesie while asking, oddly specific, whether I lived alone. "Just checking the household registry," she said sweetly, though nothing that friendly should require a clipboard and a stopwatch. That night I found a new form in my mailbox: Child Safety Compliance Survey, entirely unofficial, entirely unnerving. I didn't fill it out. That silence, I'd later learn, Karen recorded as uncooperative and evasive in her private log. My ex-husband, Rick, chose that exact week to reappear, suddenly interested in custody after 18 months of silence. Karen, somehow, already knew his name before I'd mentioned him to a single soul in the neighborhood. "Small world," she said, when I asked how. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. It never actually did. The fines piled up fast, $400 in 3 weeks, each one contested, each contest denied without explanation. I requested the HOA bylaws in writing. Karen stalled for 11 days, then handed me an updated version, freshly altered. Clauses I'd never seen appeared, granting the board sweeping authority over resident conduct affecting community welfare and children. I should have photographed the original packet I received at move-in. I hadn't. That gap would nearly cost me everything. Priya had, though. She quietly texted me a photo of her own original bylaws from 2 years back. The difference between versions was stark, undeniable and completely illegal under state HOA disclosure law, if we could prove intent. I started keeping my own folder that night, an inch of frustration thick, already sensing this wasn't over. The mailbox war escalated into something uglier the morning Karen filed a noise complaint about Dalton's crying at 2 a.m. Excessive disturbance, the notice read, as if my infant had violated a curfew he was too young to understand. I laughed, genuinely laughed, until I saw the fine, $200, due in 5 business days, no appeal listed. I marched to the HOA office demanding answers, only to find Karen already waiting, coffee in hand, unbothered. "Babies cry everywhere, Karen. You can't fine a baby for existing, I said, voice shaking with disbelief. I can fine the guardian for failing to maintain community standards, she replied, calm as a courtroom stenographer. Something in her tone told me this wasn't really about noise. It never had been. It was about control. I paid the fine just to buy peace, hating myself for it, hating her more for making me. That same week, my landlord, Karen's cousin, coincidentally, mentioned my lease might not renew if issues continued. The web tightened. Not one villain, but a whole quiet network protecting one woman's need to feel powerful. I confided in Priya over coffee and she told me something that changed how I saw all of this. Karen did this to the Alvarez family last year. Drove them out in 4 months. Nobody talks about it. Drove them out how? I asked, stomach dropping before she'd even answered the question I already feared. CPS call. False one. Took weeks to clear their name. By then they'd already sold and left town. My blood went cold. Karen wasn't just petty. She had a pattern, a playbook and apparently, a taste for it. I started documenting everything obsessively, every notice, every drive-by, every strange smile at the mailbox, time-stamped and saved. I bought a cheap home camera, angled toward my porch, telling myself it was for package theft, nothing more. 2 nights later, that camera caught Karen at 11 p.m., peering through my fence, phone raised, photographing my window. My hands shook watching the footage. This woman was surveilling a sleeping baby like he was evidence in her file. I didn't call the police yet. I wanted more. I wanted a case she couldn't smile her way out of. Karen's next move came through official channels, an HOA wellness check request filed with the county, citing safety concerns. A social worker named Denise showed up unannounced, apologetic, explaining she was required to follow up on any formal complaint. Denise looked around my clean, stocked, obviously loved home and told me, quietly, this complaint reads like harassment, not concern. She left with notes, but the file stayed open. Bureaucracy doesn't close doors just because one worker suspects malice. I thanked Denise, closed the door and sat on my kitchen floor shaking, holding Dalton like the world might take him. That night I called my sister, a paralegal, and read her every notice Karen had sent since move-in day. This isn't an HOA dispute anymore, she said flatly. This is a woman building a paper trail to hurt you. She told me to start a public folder, printed and digital, time-stamped, backed up in 3 separate places immediately. I did exactly that, adding footage, texts, fine notices, even Denise's card, into a fireproof box under my bed. I didn't know yet how badly I'd need every single page inside that box before this was over. Karen escalated again, this time convening an emergency board session, officially to discuss recurring compliance failures at 14 Birchwood Lane. My address. Read aloud to 11 neighbors like a verdict already decided, my name attached to imaginary crimes. I wasn't invited to defend myself. Board bylaws, conveniently, didn't require notifying residents under active review, a phrase invented that week. Priya snuck me the minutes afterward. Karen had proposed a formal recommendation that I be reported to Child Services again. Again. As if the first false alarm hadn't already nearly cost me my son and my sanity both. I stood outside Karen's house the next morning, heart pounding, ready to confront her once and for all. She answered the door in a robe, coffee mug reading HOA Queen, smiling like she'd been expecting this visit. Maya, sweetie, this could all stop if you just followed the rules, she said, voice syrup sweet, eyes ice cold. There are no rules, Karen. You're inventing them, I snapped, louder than intended, startling a bird off her fence. Careful with that tone. Wouldn't want the county thinking you're unstable around your son, she said and shut the door. That threat sat in my chest like a stone for days. She wasn't hiding it anymore. She was daring me. I finally called a lawyer, a sharp woman named Renata who'd handled 2 prior HOA abuse cases in this county. 078 Renata reviewed my folder for 20 minutes, then looked up and said, this is enough to sue, eventually. Not yet. We need her to overreach publicly. Something undeniable, something a judge can't wave away as neighborly disagreement. I hated waiting. But Renata was right. Karen needed rope and Karen, it turned out, loved rope. The overreach came 3 days later and it came from my baby directly, exactly like the title promised. Karen filed an emergency CPS report claiming she'd personally witnessed me leave an infant unattended in a hot vehicle. It was a lie. Dalton had been in daycare that entire afternoon, badge scanned in and out, time-stamped by 2 staff members. But emergency reports move fast, faster than truth. A caseworker arrived with a police escort before I even got the call. "Ma'am, we need to take custody pending investigation," the officer said, and that's when the world actually stopped turning. I begged them to check the daycare logs first, screaming Dalton's name as they carried his car seat away. "We'll verify everything, but protocol requires immediate placement when a witness report cites imminent danger," the caseworker said, not unkindly. Witness. Karen was the witness. Karen, standing at the end of my driveway, arms crossed, watching my whole life unravel. I locked eyes with her for one long second. She didn't look away. She looked satisfied, like a job well done. That's the moment something in me went completely, coldly quiet, and I stopped being afraid of her at all. I didn't hit her that day. I want to be clear about the order of events, because it matters later. That day, I called Renata, called the daycare director, called Denise the social worker, and started building a wall of proof. The daycare director faxed time-stamped sign-in sheets within the hour, showing Dalton in their care during the alleged incident. Denise, reviewing the new complaint, recognized Karen's name immediately and flagged the file for its pattern of false reporting. By evening, the caseworker called back, voice apologetic, confirming Dalton would be returned within 24 hours, pending final review. 24 hours. An eternity when your baby is sleeping in a stranger's temporary care because of one woman's spite. I didn't sleep that night. I sat with Dalton's empty crib and read every text Karen had ever sent me. Buried in an old message thread, I found something I'd forgotten. Karen once mentioned losing custody once, unfairly, years ago. My sister, digging through public records, found it. Karen Whitfield had lost guardianship of a niece in 2011. The report cited chronic false allegations against extended family, almost word for word what she was doing to me now. This wasn't Karen protecting a neighborhood. This was Karen replaying her own worst trauma onto every family she could reach. Understanding that didn't make me pity her. It made me furious that so many families had already paid for it. Morning came, and with it, Dalton, finally, wrapped in a hospital blanket, handed back with an official apology letter. I held him so tight the caseworker gently reminded me to breathe, laughing softly through her own visible relief. But relief didn't last. Karen, undeterred, posted in the neighborhood app that some residents clearly have something to hide. Comments piled up, some supportive of me, others parroting Karen's talking points, whispering about unfit mothers and red flags. I realized then this wouldn't end with Dalton's return. Karen needed public humiliation, not just private paperwork, to feel powerful again. Renata agreed. We go legal and we go loud. Quietly winning won't stop someone like her from doing this again. We filed a formal complaint against Karen with the County HOA Oversight Board, citing harassment and a false CPS report. We also filed with the State Consumer Affairs Office, since Karen had altered official bylaws without proper board vote. Priya, brave enough now, came forward with the Alvarez family's old complaint, buried for over a year in HOA archives. Denise submitted her professional notes confirming a documented pattern of retaliatory, unsubstantiated reports tied to Karen Whitfield's name. The daycare director agreed to testify, if needed, that the hot car claim was provably, time-stamped false. For the first time since this began, I felt the tide actually shifting, slowly, in my favor instead of hers. Karen felt it too. Her posts turned frantic, then vanished entirely, replaced by a suspiciously calm, family emergency notice. She wasn't leaving. She was regrouping, and women like Karen regroup by finding a new angle to attack from. That new angle arrived disguised as kindness, a fruit basket on my porch, an apology note, an invitation to talk privately. Renata warned me not to go alone. She's trying to get you unrecorded, unsupervised, saying something she can twist. I went anyway, camera rolling in my jacket pocket, Dalton safe at my sister's, heart pounding through my ribs. Karen greeted me warmly, offered tea and within minutes pivoted to, we could make this whole mess disappear quietly. Drop your complaints and I'll drop mine. Fresh start, she said, sliding a PR-written retraction letter across the table. I almost signed it. God, I almost did, just to feel normal again, just to make the fear stop. Then she added one sentence too many, besides, who's a judge going to believe, me or a broke single MOM? That line, arrogant and cruel, was exactly the unguarded moment Renata had been waiting 3 weeks for me to catch. My recorder caught every syllable, clean and clear, Karen's own voice admitting the retaliatory nature of her campaign. I left without signing anything, hands shaking, adrenaline roaring, Karen's smug smile burned permanently into my memory. That recording became the centerpiece of our county complaint, transforming vague suspicion into recorded, undeniable admission of intent. The HOA Oversight Board scheduled an emergency hearing and word spread fast through Willow Creek's group chats and porches. Neighbors I'd never spoken to suddenly waved, offered support, admitted quietly they'd feared Karen's clipboard for years, silently. Karen, sensing the shift, tried preemptive damage control, hosting a community barbecue the same week as the hearing. Almost nobody came. Her sign-up sheet, usually packed, held 4 names, 2 of them her own relatives. The isolation clearly rattled her. I saw her, for the first time, look genuinely uncertain standing alone by an empty grill. Small twist worth noting, Karen's husband, quiet until now, filed for divorce that same week, citing long-term deceptive behavior. Court filings, public record, revealed Karen had forged his signature on several HOA financial documents over 3 years. The HOA's own treasury, IT turned out, had unexplained shortfalls Karen always blamed on landscaping cost overruns. Renata pulled those financial records instantly, adding embezzlement suspicion to our growing pile of formal complaints against her. The hearing date arrived faster than expected, moved up after the state office flagged urgent pattern of abuse indicators in our filing. I walked into that community center with my folder, my recording, my daycare logs and Dalton asleep against my chest. Karen walked in polished, lawyer beside her, prepared statement in hand, still radiating the same practiced, icy confidence. The board president, new and clearly nervous, called the meeting to order and the room went absolutely silent. My lawyer presented first, the falsified bylaws, the CPS report, the daycare timestamps proving it false beyond argument. Gasps rippled through the crowd when Renata played 30 seconds of Karen's own recorded voice admitting retaliation outright. Karen's lawyer objected to admissibility, citing consent laws, but our state allowed one-party consent and Renata had the statute ready. Karen's composure cracked visibly then, jaw tight, knuckles white around a water bottle she never actually opened. Priya stood next, reading the Alvarez family's year-old complaint aloud, the same tactics, the same lies, time-stamped and undeniable. Then Denise, the caseworker, spoke professionally but devastatingly, confirming 3 unrelated false reports tied back to Karen's name. This isn't a single mistake, Denise said. This is a documented, repeated pattern spanning at least 4 years. The room's mood shifted from shocked to furious, neighbors murmuring, some standing, demanding Karen's immediate removal from the board. Karen finally spoke, voice cracking for the first time, insisting she'd only ever wanted a safe, well-kept community. Safe for who, Karen? I asked, standing before I'd even decided to. Not for me. Not for my son. She turned toward me then, something snapping behind her eyes, years of control unraveling in real time before everyone. You people, she started, before catching herself, but the room had already heard exactly what she almost said. That half-sentence, loaded and telling, would later be quoted in 3 separate news articles about the case. The board president called for an immediate vote on Karen's removal, citing overwhelming evidence of misconduct and fraud. 14 votes for removal. 2 abstentions, both relatives. 0 votes in her favor. The gavel came down hard. Karen stood abruptly, chair scraping loud against tile, storming toward the exit, lawyers scrambling to catch up behind her. She stopped at the door, turned and pointed directly at me. This isn't over. I know people. I have connections. So do I said quietly. Turns out mine include a state investigator who just subpoenaed your HOA bank records. Her face went pale, genuinely pale, the mask finally, completely gone, replaced by raw, cornered panic. That's when Karen made her final, fatal mistake, the one the title of this story was always building toward. She lunged, not toward me exactly, but toward Dalton's stroller, grabbing the handle like she intended to take him again. You don't get to keep him after everything you've put me through. She screamed, completely unhinged, completely irrational now. Every parent's nightmare, playing out in real time, in front of 14 witnesses and 2 responding officers already outside. I stepped between her and the stroller, adrenaline overriding thought, and shoved her back hard with both hands. She stumbled, caught the edge of a folding table and went down, dazed, momentarily knocked flat by her own momentum. To be precise, for the sake of the truth, I didn't throw a punch. I pushed her off my son. But the room, already tense, erupted, someone shouted, she attacked the mother, and chaos genuinely broke loose for a moment. The officers stationed outside for crowd management rushed in fast, radios crackling, boots pounding across the linoleum floor. They found Karen on the ground, disoriented, still shouting about stolen custody rights that were never legally hers to claim. "Ma'am, you need to calm down," one officer said, but Karen swung wildly at him too, panicked, past reasoning entirely. That single swing at a uniformed officer changed everything, instantly, from a community dispute into a criminal matter. Handcuffs came out fast, metal clicking loud in the stunned silence, Karen's wrists pinned behind her back within seconds. "You don't understand who I am," she screamed, dragged toward the door, voice cracking with disbelief at her own arrest. "We understand exactly who you are," the officer replied flatly. "Assault on an officer. Everything else, we'll sort out downtown." I stood frozen, Dalton crying now, safe in my arms, watching the woman who terrorized my family get walked out in cuffs. The hearing didn't just end her HOA presidency. It opened the door to everything else waiting underneath the surface. Investigators, following the embezzlement lead, found nearly $40,000 in unaccounted HOA funds routed through Karen's personal account. The false CPS reports, once cross-referenced statewide, matched 2 other counties where Karen had briefly lived years earlier. 3 more families came forward within a week, each with their own folder of fines, threats and false complaints. A local news station picked up the story, HOA president arrested after family feud turns physical, fraud uncovered. Reporters camped briefly outside Willow Creek and neighbors, once silent, suddenly couldn't stop talking to every microphone offered. Priya became something of a spokesperson for the block, calmly detailing years of quiet, unreported intimidation from Karen's tenure. The Alvarez family, watching from their new home 2 states away, finally filed their own long-overdue formal complaint. My inbox filled with messages from strangers in other states describing eerily similar HOA power abuse stories of their own. For the first time in months, I felt something unfamiliar settle into my chest, not fear, but something like justice. Karen's arraignment came 2 weeks later, assault charges layered atop embezzlement charges layered atop pending fraud investigations. Her lawyer requested a plea deal. The prosecutor, citing the pattern of victims, declined to offer anything lenient. "This isn't a one-time lapse in judgment," the prosecutor told the court. "This is a documented pattern of abuse of power." Karen sat silent through most of it, the confidence completely drained from her posture, her voice barely above a whisper. When asked to enter a plea, she said only, "Not guilty," though almost nobody in that courtroom believed her anymore. The HOA itself dissolved its old board entirely, installing an emergency oversight committee led, fittingly, by Priya herself. New bylaws were drafted publicly, transparently, with resident input required before any fine or complaint could be enforced. The daycare director sent me a card that week, glad the truth caught up to her. Dalton's always welcome here. Denise called too, off the record, saying my case would likely change how her department flagged repeat report offenders statewide. Small victories stacked on small victories, each one chipping away at the year of fear Karen had built around me. I want to pause here and admit something honestly, winning didn't erase the damage those months had already done. I still checked the crib twice some nights, still flinched at unfamiliar cars slowing near my driveway after dark. Trauma doesn't disappear just because the villain finally faces consequences. It just becomes something you learn to carry differently. Renata reminded me of that gently. Justice isn't healing. It's just the ground healing gets to happen on. I held on to that. Some nights it was the only sentence keeping me from spiraling back into old fear. Karen's civil trial came months later, HOA fraud stacked with wrongful CPS reporting, for families testifying against her by then. I took the stand, laying out every notice, every recording, every timestamp, calm in a way that surprised even me. Her lawyer tried to paint me as unstable, citing that assault at the board meeting, hoping to muddy the record. The judge, reviewing full footage from that night, noted clearly, the defendant initiated contact toward a minor's stroller first. That single clarification undid the defense's entire strategy in one sentence, and everyone in the room seemed to feel it. The jury deliberated less than 3 hours before returning guilty verdicts on embezzlement and 2 counts of false reporting. Karen received restitution orders totaling over $60,000, plus a permanent injunction barring her from any HOA leadership role. She was also ordered into a state-mandated psychological evaluation program, addressing what the court called compulsive retaliatory behavior patterns. Watching her led out of that courtroom, quiet this time, no clipboard, no title, felt like watching a spell finally break. I didn't cheer. I didn't need to. The silence of her defeat said everything louder than celebration ever could. Willow Creek, meanwhile, kept healing in small, visible ways. A community garden replaced the old compliance bulletin board entirely. Priya organized a real barbecue, the kind with actual attendance, actual laughter, actual neighbors finally trusting each other again. Dalton, older now, toddling instead of crawling, chased Bubbles across the same lawn once measured for regulation grass height. Rick, my ex, quietly dropped his custody claim once he realized Karen's earlier, helpful tips to him had been manipulation too. Turns out Karen had been feeding him information the whole time, hoping a custody battle would break me down faster. Karen hadn't just targeted me randomly. She'd actively recruited my own past against me. Renata found messages between Karen and Rick dating back further than his sudden reappearance, proving deliberate, calculated coordination. Rick, to his credit, testified to that coordination once he understood how thoroughly he'd been used as a pawn. It didn't excuse him. But it added one more brick to the wall of evidence burying Karen completely. By the time all the dust settled, Karen Whitfield's name had become a cautionary tale told at every HOA meeting statewide. I started speaking occasionally to local parenting groups about HOA overreach, sharing my folder as a template for others. Several attendees cried hearing the daycare timestamp story, recognizing their own half-formed suspicions about power-hungry board members finally validated. Denise's department implemented new training specifically citing my case, teaching caseworkers to flag repeat reporter patterns much earlier now. The state legislature, prompted by our case and 3 others, proposed reforms limiting HOA authority over child welfare reporting. It wouldn't pass for another year, but Renata told me, "You planted something real." That's not nothing, Maya. I think about that mailbox conversation sometimes, the fruit basket, the 17-page rulebook, how normal Karen seemed that first day. Evil, I learned, rarely announces itself with a villain's monologue. It announces itself with fruit baskets and friendly smiles. It hides behind clipboards, behind just following the rules, behind the comforting authority of a laminated badge and a title. Karen believed her own narrative completely, right up until a recorder in my jacket proved otherwise beyond any doubt. That's the part that still unsettles me most, how convinced she seemed, every single step of the way, that she was right. Dalton won't remember any of this, thankfully, too young to carry what I carried through those brutal months. But I'll remember every notice, every drive-by, every night I sat with an empty crib and a full folder. I'll remember Priya's quiet courage, Denise's professional integrity, Renata's patient strategy, and the neighbors who finally found their voices. I'll remember the exact sound handcuffs make closing around wrists that spent years pointing fingers at everyone but themselves. Justice, when it finally came, didn't feel like triumph so much as exhausted, hard-won relief settling slowly into my bones. Karen serves her sentence now, stripped of every title she once wielded like a weapon against her own neighbors. Willow Creek elected new board members last spring, ordinary neighbors, no clipboards, no surveillance cameras aimed at strollers. I still live at 14 Birchwood Lane, grass a little taller than regulation now, and nobody's ever said a word. Some mornings I catch myself glancing at the mailbox, half expecting a pink notice that never comes again. Dalton is safe, home is quiet, and the woman who once tried to steal my son lost everything instead.